We're not crazy, the system is. Tune in to Madness Radio, Voices and Visions from Outside Mental Health, Wednesdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, on Pacifica affiliate WXOJLP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio. Produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project, streaming live, podcasting, and archived at madnessradio.net. Welcome to Madness Radio. This is Will Hall. I'm your host, and today we're doing a show on Ibogaine therapy for addiction treatment and mental health issues. Ibogaine is a hallucinogenic or visionary substance that's derived from a sacred plant that's used in West Africa by the indigenous people there, and it's been very promising in providing support and help for people in addiction recovery. So we're going to be speaking with someone who does work with that in Mexico. And first, a little bit about Madness Radio's producers, the Icarus Project and Freedom Center. Freedom Center is a local support, activism, and advocacy community for people who have been in the mental health system and who are struggling with extreme states of consciousness. And you can find out more information on our website, which is freedom-center.org. We have a lot of different holistic services that are free and open to everyone in the community. We have a free yoga class. We have a free acupuncture clinic. We also have a writing group and a lot of different things that are going on. So just check out our website, which is freedom-center.org. Madness Radio is also co-produced by the Icarus Project, which is a primarily online, but also has a number of local groups in a network of people who've been diagnosed with bipolar, other mental health disorders, labels, and who are looking beyond the medical framework for how to live, and people who are using creativity and spirituality. And you can find out more information on the Icarus Project website, which is theicarusproject.net. And I just wanted to take a moment also to announce that Freedom Center was recently awarded a $3,000 grant from the city of Northampton as part of the city's Community Block Development Grant, which is administering funds through a federal program. So on behalf of the Freedom Center, I want to thank Mayor Higgins and everyone in the Northampton city government and the people of Northampton for supporting Freedom Center's work with low-income people who are struggling with different emotional distress states and who are looking to get access to mental health options and support and referrals and resources and holistic services. So my guest today is Rocky Caravelli. Rocky is calling from Sayulita, Mexico, where he is the director of the Awaken In The Dream House, which is an Ibogaine treatment center working with addiction and other emotional, psychological problems. He's 42 years old and began doing Ibogaine treatments in December of 2003 after he detoxed from methadone, heroin, and methamphetamines when he was 25 years in active addiction. And he was facing relapse and wasn't able to get out of the addiction, but then Ibogaine was really helpful. And we're going to hear about Rocky's experience and about the work that they're doing in Mexico and Ibogaine treatments. So thanks a lot for joining us, Rocky.
Good afternoon, Will. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So it's an amazing story, and I want to make sure to just kind of start off by telling people that there's it's a protest or demonstration happening in New York City, and is that coming up sometime soon in September? Do you know about that, the Ibogaine Walk?
Yeah, the Ibogaine Walk is really to help inform the East Coast of the availability of Ibogaine and its use as a treatment for addiction therapy, especially in opiate withdrawal. It's to inform the public, and they're going to go from city to city, starting in Washington, D.C. to New York City, which New York City has been kind of a birthplace for a lot of Ibogaine
and this is
public information.
And this is in September. What's the date on that?
I think it starts on the 15th.
15th of September.
It's going to go on, 15th of September for 6 weeks. It's going to be like I said, they're going to go from one city to the next, basically trying to bring information about Ibogaine as utilizing it as a therapy and any kind of public information, about its practicality and use.
Great. Well, it sounds like it's a good time to be doing some public education work about Ibogaine. You can find out more about the Ibogaine Walk at ibogainewalk.com, and that's Ibogaine, AINEwalk.com. So Rocky, you yourself have faced addiction and struggled with these issues. Kind of give us some background of your own story here. I guess that's a good place to get started about how this has affected you and where you get involved in this.
Yeah, what really happened was in about 1992, I was about 28 years old, and I'd been using cocaine and alcohol and methamphetamine up to that point, and started to do my first rehabilitation centers. Went through several rehabilitation centers, and generally I would get a reprieve from my addiction for anywhere from 1 month to 4 months or 6 months, and at one point I had a year, and I went back and forth with that for almost 12 years.
How was what kind of addiction were you facing? I mean, you were an IV drug user, or what was?
I was IV methamphetamine for 12 years, and and if I wasn't, if I was afraid to get back into that, I would smoke crack cocaine and drink heavily during those times. I didn't start using heroin until the final year of my addiction process. I had been 3 years clean and had picked up again, and just really started using the heroin and methamphetamine, and could not get off of it, not even with the methadone. In fact, it seemed to accelerate it.
Now, was this something that was really affecting your life? I mean, there are the rare folks who can have an addiction and sort of carry on with their job and their life and be in the community, but it sounds like it was really, really devastating for you.
Yeah, I mean, for a period of time, I was able to function normally, but it's always the same kind of pattern. You get kind of clean for a while, you start using, and then you have this slow deterioration of your lifestyle, which is actually very frustrating for somebody who can get clean and then can't get clean, and keeps going back and forth. But that last year, I couldn't get clean. I mean, I knew I was spiraling down. There was nothing that was going to stop the addiction. There wasn't any treatment rehab. There wasn't any meetings. There wasn't anything available that was going to stop what was happening. And it was happening really fast and really hard. And my father died at 42, so I was like 39 at this time, and I just felt like I was basically in the same rut. I was deteriorating physically, and there wasn't any other kind of option for treatment. Buprenorphine was just starting to come out. That was kind of a joke. So I started looking and heard about through the needle exchange about this Ibogaine treatment. I read it in Discover magazine. I found another article. It just started showing up.
And you also were diagnosed with different mental health. You were diagnosed with bipolar at one point, is that right?
Yeah, for like 15 years they tried to use different psychiatric methods for treatment for what they thought were the core of my addiction trigger, I guess, or my addiction response, self-medicating, that kind of category of, I mean, it was, in one sense it was true. I was completely not in my body, so whether I was on drugs or not, it seemed like there was some kind of ailment in the system. That's probably the best description. There was just a level of discomfort whether I was clean or whether I was loaded. So.
So you tried all these different. You were basically a user for 25 years, and you tried pretty much everything that was available. And then it sounds like through the harm reduction community, which is great to hear, because Freedom Center is very much part of the harm reduction movement and takes a harm reduction approach. You found out about Ibogaine. How did that happen?
Well, my first call was to Eric Taub, who is now who we're affiliated with as far as our major sponsor for clients and stuff. And Eric had referred me to the Ibogaine Association because I was on the West Coast. And I had made contact there with the director, Randy, and it took 10 months from my original call to manifest the money and to prepare. It was just a matter of preparation and really basically breaking down my will. So when I showed up down there, I was pretty prepared to go through this process of hopefully replacing my addiction. Is what I really wanted to do. Is I wanted to find some way to let this thing go, and it did. Like in the first 45 minutes of the treatment, it was profound.
So you went to a clinic in Mexico, or where did you get the treatment?
Yeah, at the Ibogaine Association, which was at the time in Rosarito. They're still there. They're still in the border town near Tijuana. They've been in operation they're probably they're the oldest West Coast operation, and they're good people. And I was where I went for my primary treatment, and that's where I stayed on to learn how to facilitate treatments.
I want to ask you, more about what exactly happened in the treatment, especially when you're doing the Ibogaine journeys. Mm-hmm. But maybe we should just tell people what Ibogaine is and how it kind of emerged as a drug addiction treatment method.
Well, it was an accident. There was an ex-addict, well, at the time was a practicing addict who took Ibogaine in the 60s, 1962, Howard Lotsoff, basically kind of as a thrill-seek. So the guy told him it was an African root, that it was an extract from an African root, and that it was kind of a strange substance. It wasn't quite hallucinatory. It was more visionary and dreamlike. And he took this, and to his astonishment, 3 days later, kind of realized, oh my God, I'm not in opiate withdrawal. I should be really, really sick. And he tried that with 7 others and found it to be successful in arresting opiate withdrawal, which was the primary purpose of study in the beginning. Then what started happening is I started seeing that the same results were happening, and it was resetting the mind in different areas around cocaine and alcohol, methamphetamine, even nicotine. And why it works across the board is kind of an interesting process that they're studying right now. Why would one substance be able to not only stop opiate withdrawal, but also reset and take away cravings for other substances? So it's been a profound substance of study for the last 15 years, and it's getting a lot more recognition as an addiction interrupter.
And it originates as a sacred healing spirit plant from indigenous people in West Africa. Is that right?
Yeah, Gabon and Cameroon are kind of the small nest egg place where this root has been used for initiation into rite of passage into manhood and womanhood. It's used for both sexes. It's always been a unity type rite of passage for both male and female. It's not kind of discriminatory. In other words, where in some cultures it's always been segregated, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's been used for thousands of years, but it's really been a structured church called the Bwiti for the last 150 years. It's been more like an organized religion, and there's 2 million members in Gabon from the Bwiti Church. It's that actual organized religious rite, and it's part of the sacrament of that church is to go through this process as an initiate using the iboga root. And the ibogaine is an isolated active alkaloid out of many alkaloids that seems to be the one that hits this reset and also facilitates dreams.
So it's, in a sense, iboga is, which is the root that it starts from before it's distilled, I guess, into ibogaine. That is kind of a psychedelic or hallucinogen in the sense that it's a sacred plant that, like other cultures, many cultures around the world have a visionary or hallucinogenic plant that's used as part of their religious and spiritual practices. And then the person who sort of stumbled onto it, this was before the isolated part was discovered, is that right? Or is that...
No, it was the ibogaine. It was the actual isolated alkaloid. It wasn't the root bark. It was the ibogaine hydrochloride, which is the same as what we use today. And so it was in the Western world, and ibogaine's been around since the 50s. They had utilized, and the French had found about it, and has utilized it on small doses for like a stimulant kind of effect. And it's not a comfortable experience as far as it has some kind of interesting side effects.
Well, yeah. Tell us about what happened to you. I mean, you went to Mexico, kind of looking for some, relief and cure for the addiction, and then what happened? I mean, you took this, and how was it? Were you in a room that you were sort of stayed in for a long time, or were you out in nature, or what was it that happened?
Well, at that time, this is really funny to think about because I can barely imagine this kind of setting, but. It was in a small hospital in Playa de Tijuana, that was monitored by a doctor, and it was basically kind of like it was comfortable. It was kind of a gurney room with tile floors, and they administered it in the daytime, which is something that we try to do this at nighttime, and it started at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and I was pretty ill. I had been almost 3 days without methadone, and 2 days. Well, 1.5 days without any heroin, and about 3 days without any methamphetamine. So I was pretty garbled. But what it really did was help benefit me in the long run. And they helped keep me comfortable with a little Valium and that kind of thing. But the initial dose was a 1/3 dose. We do a test dose to see what people's sensitivity and to see if there's any kind of strong reaction that would be considered negative or something like that. The term allergy comes up, but it's not really accurate. And then about an hour later, they give you a flood dose. We've changed that a little bit, but for me, that worked perfect. And then the initial part of the treatment started with some dreaming about a living tree, a tree that was alive, very much alive, and was trying to intimidate me. One of the branches tried to intimidate me, and I explained to this branch that I wasn't afraid of it, that I'd met it before, that I knew who it was, which profoundly came out of some place in my body. I have no idea why I was familiar with this tree spirit creature. And soon after, the second dose hit, and due to methamphetamine use, sometimes when the Ibogaine hits really fast and strong, it kind of knocks you unconscious. So I basically fell asleep for the remaining 4 hours of my treatment. It's generally a 4 to 6 hour visionary treatment, and I woke up not feeling really well, but felt pretty comfortable in my body. I felt the receptors in my body in the first 45 minutes of the treatment be filled up, as far as like the pain in my spine, the discomfort in my joints, the symptoms of withdrawal basically left within 45 minutes, and I felt it go all the way into my fingernails, into the tips of my hair. I mean, it went everywhere and filled it up. And that was an intimidating feeling at first, and then realized it went in 3 major waves through my body. And I realized, oh my God, my addiction's done, that part of it. And like I said, soon after I went to sleep, I guess. It felt more like being knocked out, but it was basically going to sleep. And then the following day, when I got back to the main recovery house and woke up, I just started crying. I realized that I didn't have to use anymore. And got up and had a bowl of cereal without sugar on it, a cup of black coffee, which I hadn't had in a year, and took my clothes off and laid out in the sun for the remaining 3 days of the primary integration period, and was profoundly affected by the fact that my teeth had stopped hurting overnight. The sugar cravings had gone away. This desire for it was just very, very interesting to see this happen so fast, because having detoxed before, your body doesn't rebalance itself very quickly. It's a very long, drawn-out process of discomfort for weeks and weeks, and this had happened overnight.
And what do you make of the vision that you had, the dream of the tree? Have you had more thought about that since having it?
Well, it was my introduction. I had opportunities to ask about it in other sessions with different people, and during their treatment, I was offered the opportunity to ask questions about it, and it was my introduction to this spirit plant, and it was profoundly clear to me that I had known it, that it's part of my genetic building for me. I am actually familiar with this spirit. I don't know if that's through our genetics or through our family order or if it's something from past life. I really don't know why I knew this being, and he really did try to intimidate me. He screamed at me. He roared at me. And it was like this big fire of a face. And I didn't laugh at it. I was respectful, but I definitely had a sense of comfort of knowing who it was. And, I've been in service to that since since that moment. I mean, I pretty much realized within that first 3 days of integration that my old life was done, and I basically crossed a line in the sand and I have not gone back. I just moved past that line, and it's a profound experience to be able to look back really quickly after that primary treatment and realize every day of my using was preparing me for a new role in my life. It was everything I needed. It was every hit I needed. It was everything I needed in order to move past that line. But boy, when you're stuck on the other side of that line, it just seems like it's an unbearable hell of repetition.
Had you been a spiritual person prior to this experience? Because it sounds like this was But it was a real it was a real conversion in some kind of sense, or some kind of spiritual awakening experience. It sounds like.
Well, there was an awareness awakening, is what happened. I mean, I think a spiritual awakening is something that happens. Can happen, I think real quickly, and I guess the comparison is that there was an awareness awakening. There was some part of my being that became aware of who and what I really needed to be and do, and like I said, it was a non-turn back point. It was like, and a spiritual awakening could be. I think I had many of those in my experiences using substances, and then using the experience of getting off substances. I had many spiritual experiences, but as far as a genuine awakening, this was a turn your head kind of deal. I mean, it was. And that was just my personal experience,
Was this a lasting effect? I mean, were you able to? What happened after that? Were you able to just kick the drugs at that point?
Well, yeah, I haven't used opiates since. I mean, I was over 3.5 years ago. I did have a second treatment 8 months later. I had a 5-day run on methamphetamine, and that was over 3 years ago now. And yeah, I haven't touched substances since. The second treatment really, really helped. Like I said, it's just I'd started to develop a relationship with this particular spirit, and I saturated myself in the environment of treatment for 9 months. So it was a pretty protective kind of environment, and offered a lot of training and opportunity to see how this thing was working in other people,
And are there side effects to the Ibogaine? I mean, what are the risks or dangers? Because I want to talk about it kind of in general, but I just was wondering, did you suffer any negative effects from the treatment?
Me? No, I had no negative side effects whatsoever. I didn't throw up during the session, which is one of the common ones. I didn't have a whole lot of ataxia, which is another common side effect. What is
ataxia?
It's a loss of motor coordination.
Oh, it's like a drunken kind of.
Yeah, what happens is it's a real the substance it's a pretty much wants your full attention kind of substance. So it's really, really difficult to move, and if you move, it induces nausea, and so you lay pretty much primarily still for about 6 to 12 hours, which is very relaxing. I mean, if you're just going to basically be in a dream state anyway, so you kind of tuck yourself into bed kind of thing, and you just lay as still as possible during the primary process. If you do get up, it's really prone to make you nauseous. I'd say about 1/3 of the people experience vomiting. The nausea is pretty common if you do any movement at all, but it doesn't mean you're going to have any vomiting. But in some cases, people vomit a lot and have to, they're in some kind of purging process and they're trying to get rid of something.
But in terms of toxicity or drug dangers, there really aren't any.
Well, there's cross-contradictions. Like if you use after you've taken Ibogaine, you can kill yourself really easily.
like how if you just went back to heroin use or methamphetamine use.
Yeah.
So it can potentiate the power of those drugs, then you would have an overdose. Is that right?
Not only potentiate them, but because all your receptors are clean. I mean, it's like your body is really, your receptor sites are buffed clean, and so it's really a potential hazard to use after the Ibogaine, which is, there's a couple things that we have to really protect people for, and one of them is an environment where they can integrate for a few days, so that that opportunity isn't completely available, because they can easily overdose and die. One of the other things is that especially in not so much in people doing psychospiritual or personal development work, but anytime you're dealing with anybody that's been in active addiction, there's compromises in the body, whether it's the liver, the heart, the different, your kidneys. There's just other health aspects that have to be evaluated and screened beforehand. We do EKGs and a full liver panel just to find out the state of the cardiovascular system and the state of the body's ability to break down Ibogaine and to be able to eliminate the toxins that are broken loose in the system.
So I want to find out more about the work that you do in Mexico at the center you direct, and also I want to get a little bit more deeply into the spiritual side of this. But tell us a little bit more before we get into that about the status of Ibogaine use internationally. I know that there have been a lot of studies that have been done confirming that even in laboratory animals, it has this power to reduce the cravings and, as you say, to affect the receptor sites and change the whole withdrawal process. So I know it's illegal in the United States, but it's used in other countries, and what have been the studies and what have been the results of that?
Well, right now, the classification is still pretty neutral in a lot of countries. In a lot of countries, it's not recognized as a substance at all of any kind of medicinal value. Mexico is one of them where they don't even recognize it. It's more like snake urine. It falls into a category of a non-substance substance. Other countries, like I know that France just went Schedule 1. United States is Schedule 1, which means no medicinal value, which is kind of a funny scheduling to put around a substance that stops these kind of, stops these kind of addictions. Canada is recognizes it as a substance for use. South America has no regulations. Obviously, Africa has no regulations, and England has no regulations, and Amsterdam, and Europe is still really wide open. So it's just really. It's just in its beginning state of being utilized in addiction therapy, so it hasn't got a whole lot of focus yet.
But there is experience of clinics and hospitals and places around in other countries in Europe and Canada where they've been using this for years, and it's been very successful. Yeah.
I just got back from the Ibogaine conference in New York City, and they think that based on the collection of studies from the last 15 years, there's been about a total of 5,000 people treated with this substance for addiction therapy, which is a really small number. I mean, when you take the community of addicts. But the point being is that it's showing that it works. And St. Kitts has had a clinic with Deborah Mash that has been really collecting data, and they're starting to collect data at the Iboga Therapy House in Canada for MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. They've been collecting data for the efficiency and for the longevity of after. It's one thing to detox somebody, but what's going on 6 months later? Is the other question. And so all the clinics are starting to participate in these studies, and there's about I'd say 7 to 10 clinics that are really operating right now. And so, and we're all in kind of communication with each other. So
tell us about the clinic that you started in Mexico, and I know you have a very spiritual approach to it. It just got started a couple of years ago, is that right?
No, well, we just got started here this January. This is our first season, and it was based out of my experience from working in Tijuana, which was a medical profile, which was a medically sound, safe profile for safety for detox, and it offers a lot. And then some of the other aspects, that we started to realize is that we have to really acknowledge and respect this aspect of the deity that resides in this plant. And it's an obvious deity to me, and one of the things we wanted to best be able to provide were the elements that deity is basically expressed through us, which is our collective group, that do the work. And some of those aspects were the jungle, where we are is we're in an environment where, we're kind of at the Tropic of Cancer, so we're not quite at the equator where Gabon, Africa is, but we're wanting to have the elements and the sounds and the sensations of the jungle environment. The other thing that was really important was warm salt water. It's super healing and it's super vitalizing. And so we started looking where we could best establish a clinic to start providing some of the basics around what we felt would be best to help honor and show respect towards the practice of this medicine. And I haven't been to Gabon. I haven't had the opportunity to be initiated with the root bark, the iboga. But we were just trying to follow some of the instructions that were given to us. And the other aspect is that a home-like setting seemed to be better than a clinical hospital setting, and that's what most of the clinics are doing. And that's it seems to be the most comfortable. You can bring the safety of a medical clinic into a home and create the same safety standards as you would as if you were doing it in a hospital somewhere.
And how do the treatments actually go? So people come from the U.S. and how long do they stay? And then what kinds of experiences have people had? What kinds of results are you having?
Well, the first thing we really wanted to do is we wanted to make sure people stayed long enough. So people coming for non-addiction therapy, that are basically coming for personal development or because they have depression or have had, obsessive-compulsive type of behavior, 5 days has been a pretty comfortable time frame because it's a single-dose treatment. People coming for addiction for alcohol or opiates is a minimum of 7 days. That seems to be enough time to allow for additional treatments if necessary. What we call follow-up booster treatments, which are normally 1/3 doses 2 to 3 days after the formal treatment day. And, and cocaine and stimulants seem to take even a little bit longer, up to 10 days, because you have to hit it a couple of times because it's such an assaultive, stimulants are so assaultive to the egoic mind, it's such a mind-based substance that it takes a little while to help reset that part of the system. But people's experiences have been where, they've come in, we pick them up at the airport, they have a night to spend the night, they have a day of integration here in the community. Hopefully they get to go in the ocean and cleanse, and we have a couple of things that we try to offer as, some of the traditions is to cleanse in the ocean and to prepare for that treatment. We try to do the treatments, starting at sunset, which is another aspect of what we're trying to respect in some of the tradition, because it seems to be really effective in the evening hours, and it has the profundity of awaking into a new day, so it's an all-night treatment. You rarely sleep, and, and then the dreams are personal. The dreams experience, it doesn't always happen. The medicine is always felt. Whether there is a profound dream experience, it depends on what was necessary to be revealed at that time. Most people have dreams. Some have a real fast dream process, that exists, where just a ton of information is just poured through the system, which is a release process. It's kind of like what you're doing is, because you're so fully awake, but you're so fully dreaming, it's like aligning the subconscious, the unconscious, and the conscious mind all kind of get in communication for a period of time, and it's just releasing a lot of stuck energy in the body, and you can feel it. It's not such a head trippy kind of substance. It's a body trippy. I mean, you feel this substance pulsing through your body, and it's very stimulating, and it's very energetic, and it's just basically cleansing the inside of you. I mean, you can feel it energetically just going through all your systems, and people are very comfortable most of the time during the experience. We try to kind of get them started slowly and bring them into it. We're not into an assaultive type therapy. Like, I consider my first treatment a little bit assaultive, but we're much more gentle and much more willing to listen to what the body's needs are, and have become quite intuitive in that process. And so we build the body up into a state of heightened experience. And like I said, generally it appears like people are sleeping, but they're just dreaming intensely. And we try to offer the proper music for the setting, or sometimes no music at all. But in a lot of cases, we try to use traditional music.
What are some examples of some of the things that people report from these visionary dreaming states?
Well, depending on people's work that they come to do, a lot of time it's a lot of self-reflective. It's a lot of history. It's a lot of history about who they are, where they came from, what's been going on in this life. It normally in the first treatments it'll stick to that depending on what's available, but it has a lot to do with decision-making processes that placed you in either off the path or on the path during your lifetime. A lot of times you'll see a lot of different family members in the dreams. In a lot of cases, you can ask questions. There's a lot of questions you can ask to find out more about what's being revealed to you. I mean, and that's just an internal personal dialogue between you and people's awareness that there's a presiding spirit, or the awareness of spirits in the room has been something that's reported quite often. People often feel that there are people in the room playing the music. I mean, they often feel that there are trusted spirits helping guide them along. This is not totally common, but it's not uncommon. And they see themselves. They see a lot of Africans. Is the bottom line, is people see a lot of Africans and a lot of African representation, which is nothing that we're offering to them as information ahead of time. It's just part of what comes with the plant.
And what about people who, because I know that for a lot of people an addiction process is often related to abuse experiences that maybe they had in childhood or difficulties that they had in their families. Do people end up processing those kinds of experiences as well?
Yeah, the state of trauma release that happens during the treatment is profound. A lot of it happens the following day. I mean, this is a 36-hour extended journey. I mean, this medicine lasts at least 24 hours actively in the system that you notice it. And so the initial dream phase can really unleash a lot of information that can and can't be metabolized and comprehended. A lot of what comes up is a lot of different emotional states from the following day, is an integration and self-reflective period. And we really try to host a real sacred period of time of quietness for that process to continue, because stuff is moving at a much slower pace by then. The medicine is kind of subsided in its heavy voltage kind of purification. And there's a lot of self-reflection about what's been happening in the evening hours. And a lot of emotional releases can happen during that time. People can feel kind of down. A lot of the time people re-experience their trauma or re-experience the emotional states that have been basically imprisoning them. And it's a period of time where the doors are open. I mean, what we've done is we've opened something up, and it's probably the most common thing we say to people is that it's releasing stuff. The doors are opening, it's letting it out. It's just letting it out for this period of time. And then when those doors close again, that stuff's not getting back in. And it's just part of the experience of consciously experiencing what's going on at that time. people have all kinds of different experiences around this. I mean, there's some feel an immediate sense of elation, like I did, the following day, a release from prison. Other people, really stay in bed for the entire next day, and really have to wait a while before they're really willing to come back out of the room they were treated in. We treat people in the same room that they stay in for the duration of the stay, and that's perfect. That's a perfect time to just let that stuff out. And it's not uncommon to cry, and it's not uncommon to anger doesn't seem to come up very often, but it is a period of time of release.
And you, in one of the things that you wrote, you mentioned the idea of that often the depression or the addiction that someone is experiencing is actually experienced as a spirit itself that's kind of exorcised. It's like an exorcism of that spirit. Is that something that happens commonly?
Yeah, this has been something that I've gotten to watch a number of people go through this process, and it's really interesting to see what shifts. What is it that's shifting in somebody? I mean, there's a common denominator of treatment outcomes that were happening in the first 3 days of watching people come with all kinds of intense, conditions. I have to so watch my vocabulary because I don't find anything to be a problem anymore. I think that they're just motivations to try to get us to find where we can get these things dealt with. So these conditions can manifest in all kinds of different behavior, and I think that they come from trauma, not the kind of trauma of getting beat up or abused or anything like that. I think the body actually knows how to respond to those kind of traumas. It's more the subtle trauma of life. The small things that have been built up over a long period of time, where the esteem and the personality become attached to it in the ego or in the body, becomes somewhat in relationship to oneself in a negative relationship. I had an extremely negative relationship with myself. It was not a positive relationship with myself. And you would think, as human beings, that we have a choice, that we consciously know we have a choice. But it seems to be pretty common that somehow our human species, at this period of time anyway, keeps choosing to have this negative relationship with the self. And it's serving a purpose for some reason, either for protection or it's installed. It's an installed experience. And one of the first things that seems to be the result of the Ibogaine treatment is that relationship with the self starts to change. And that's profound. That means that something has been uninstalled. And the only way that I know how to really understand it, and it's the simplest way, and I know it triggers some people, is the only way I can imagine these things is as if they were spirits. And it makes me wonder, so at what point in the relationship with myself did I step out of my body and make a space for something available to come into my body and start taking over my house? And, I could see that happen in situations where I would confront certain individuals and I would watch myself recoil or return or regress somewhere else, and some other aspect of myself would step in, and it wouldn't be the self that I am. It would be some other protective self. And so it's always interested me, let's say you live alone for a long time and you observe this behavior in yourself, and you're saying, well, if it's not anybody around me, then how come this is happening? How come one day I'm feeling really, really good, I'm cruising along through life, and the next morning I wake up and I'm in this basically debilitating state of, depression, or this debilitating state of, just accelerated mind thoughts, this state of neurotic trying to control my physical environment for some type of level of comfort on the inside, whether it's cleaning or whatever it is. I'm trying to control something, and I'm like, where did this come from? And I really started observing these things in myself, and I started observing them in people I was treating, and I started realizing this is a separate self that's basically somehow stepping into my house and is operating through me. And so the word spirit comes up because they come and go. They come and go. And so it doesn't really matter, how to describe it. It's something that most humans, if you just talk about this are actually familiar with this concept.
Yeah, what you're describing to me sounds very familiar, and I know a lot of people who struggle with not just addictions, alcohol and drugs and different addictions, but also any kind of mental health difficulty. It's often experienced as like a possession state, like something from the outside comes in and is kind of grabbed you, and it's sort of, and just that image that you have of you separate from yourself and then something else comes in. It's like this relationship that it doesn't have the opportunity to come in unless you've first stepped out of yourself.
And I totally believe that is how the rules work. And whether it's such an interesting question that once it's set up, it doesn't matter whether it's a spirit or not, it's definitely going on. And whether it comes from the outside or whether it's something that's already going on with the inside, it's going on. In the pharmaceutical industry, which I'm very familiar with personally, and also on different levels with a lot of people I work with, is kind of it's a real scary thing, because on one level, pharmaceuticals, I had taken so many different cocktails of pharmaceuticals, that were administered by a doctor or psychiatrist or, in the professional field of mental health, hospitals, etc., crisis units, treatment facilities, all these kind of places where, really trying to do the best to offer some kind of stability or help. And in the long term, and I mean 3 months, that was like long term, these things not only stopped working, but they were debilitating and were creating a negative. It was actually, continuing the process of this space of not being in the body, this experience of not being in my own body, which just had all these new spirits show up. These other crazy, spirits started entering in, and I started acting even more different than I did even without the medication. And so, these things I see this happen all the time in people in this dependency for just the pharmaceutical drug industry, for antidepressants and anti-manic and anticonvulsives, which they use more than not for mania and antipsychotics, and they start mixing and matching these things, and it's like, I'm just really grateful that I haven't had to take any pharmaceutical medications for 3 years now. I think I'm finally returning to a normal state. It's taken as long for those to get out of the body as for the street drugs.
Do you work with clients there at your clinic who are struggling with coming off of psychiatric drugs, or are there some people who are on them who go through the treatment? Or how do you deal with that? I'm very interested in that.
Well, we have to have some space between. There's certain psychotropic treatment medications that really cannot be in the system during the time of treatment. Some of the SSRIs and MOA inhibitors, and and some of the anticonvulsives. What we try to do is try to get them out of the system and taper. And so, when people start wanting to come for treatment, there's a whole protocol for preparing the body, in other words, with supplement therapy, and then there's a whole other protocol for tapering down and coming off of these substances. And that's a real personal choice. People have to really be prepared to want to leave that aspect, because people have a relationship to pharmaceuticals just like they have a relationship to street drugs.
So you really ask people to come off of the psychiatric drugs before they do this treatment. I see.
Yeah, at least 72 hours to 96 hours off of your last administering of any antidepressant. And if people feel like they need to go back on it, as a result of their treatment, for let's say somebody that's been on opiates or something and they've been taking antidepressants, if they feel they need to go back on, that's fine. If people are actually coming for the treatment of depression and are wanting to get completely free of pharmaceuticals, there's a strict protocol to follow in preparation for that. And, it's like it takes about 72 hours for the integration of the Ibogaine. And so, it's a period of time where they really need to be in our care and allow for their bodies to adjust to this new state of self. So it's really important to know, and it's one of the most important questions we ask is what kind of medications are you on and what you're taking, and does it have any cross contradiction with the Ibogaine? So it's just a real important aspect of preparing for treatment.
Now, I know in an ideal world, insurance would pay for these kinds of treatments if they're shown to be safe and effective. But what does this cost, and then what kind of accessibility might there be in terms of people who can't afford it, or how do you deal with that issue?
Well, there actually is a financing company that will do financing for medical procedures that has been an assistant to us. I wish I had the name to them.
In terms of getting loans to help people pay for
there's that approach to it. Eventually we're going to have the credit card system available. We have like a PayPal system available, which can be done through the credit card. We do some sliding scale. We really want to make it an opportunity for people. In the beginning, we obviously didn't realize what our costs to operate and run a business were, so I think we were a little low in our pricing. Right now, what we're charging is if it's a non-addiction treatment, it's $3,200 for non-addictive individuals. For addiction, for people having addiction issues, which means that they're staying longer, basically, it goes to $3,700. And for opiate treatments, it's $4,000, and for methadone, it's $4,500. And so, we're kind of in a range of about, it really is just based on how much time they need to spend with us. And, it's really interesting. If this is something that really talks to people, it's been interesting how the support shows up for people to be able to really calm, to be able to do the treatment, In a lot of cases, people have been sponsored by people. We have, on certain occasions, had people who have gone through treatment that are willing to sponsor somebody for treatment. I mean, that's a common thing, and has been able to help people get here if they can't afford it on their own. We're trying to really develop a kind of a pool for people who have done treatment and who felt really good about what they did, and that they can contribute, to help people that can't get in. If we could run a nonprofit, it would be great. Then we could actually have people and be able to assist them. But it seems to be part of the journey. Is also part of the aspect of it is, depending on the individual and what their story is, we consider it the bite. It's like if you give it away, man, people don't have a tendency to hold on. I know that was my experience. I hawked my motorcycle, I had garage sales, I begged, borrowed, and stole for my treatment, and I kept it. Now, I'm not saying that that's right for everybody. I know that that's not the truth for everybody. But in my particular case, it really helped me to hold on to what I had. It made me willing, to keep what I had. And because I have this thing for taking things for granted, in the past, and that was how, I treated gifts. And
so we are unfortunately just about running out of time, but can you give us some information about how people get in touch with you and your website, information on the internet? And then I guess I also want to remind people about the Ibogaine walk that's coming up.
Yeah. The best website to reach us through is awakeninginthe.dream.com, which is www.awakeninginthe.dream.com. Also, iboganeagain.org is our parent site, who has been probably one of the longest practicing Ibogaine providers. We're partners with Ibogaine Again, and there's our phone number that can be reached is 503-922-1089, and that's 503-922-1089, and that's the office for the Awakening in the Dream House in Sayulita, Mexico.
Rocky, thank you so much for joining us today on Madness Radio.
Very cool, and thank you so much, Will, for it's public awareness that is going to make the opportunity for Ibogaine treatments to be available to people in the world, and you just never know how you're going to find it, and how people are going to hear about it, because it's just an important improvement in addiction therapy that can just get people started.
And remind us again about the Ibogaine Walk, too.
Yeah, in September, I think September 15th, will be the Ibogaine Walk starting from Washington, D.C. to New York City. It'll be stopping at many major cities, and it's basically to inform the public of the existence of Ibogaine as a therapeutic treatment for addiction and for opiate and for stimulant and alcohol.
And people can find out about that at ibogainewalk.com, Ibogaine walk.com. Thanks a lot, Rocky, for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Will.
And you've been listening to an interview with Rocky Caravelli. Rocky is the director and counselor with an Ibogaine treatment clinic in Mexico called Awakening in the Dream House. You can find out more information about Rocky's work and the treatment that they offer there by going to awakeninginthe.dream.com. And also the Ibogaine Walk, which is starting in New York City, coming up in September. You can find out more information about that at ibogainewalk.com. That's about all the time we have this week for Madness Radio. Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Madness Radio, Voices and Visions from Outside Mental Health. Madness Radio is broadcast every Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Pacifica affiliate WXOJ-LP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio in Northampton, Massachusetts. For our live internet stream, podcasting, show archives, and more, visit madnessradio.net. Madness Radio is co-produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project. For more information, check out freedom-center.org and theicarusproject.net. For more mental health radio, listen to the News Hour from mindfreedom.org, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have an idea for a story or guest on Madness Radio, or you just want to share what's in your head, contact us at radio@madnessradio.net.